us to our plan committee Monday the 15th of January here at the Civic Centre. Looking through the agenda, first of all, I'm going to ask for apologies. Pierre, we have apologies, please.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Wardle and Hannaford.
That's Wardle and Hannaford. Apologies from Wardle and Hannaford. Thank you very much indeed. Normally we would have as the next item minutes of the previous meeting, but but they have not been prepared yet, so they will be presented at the next meeting. Okay, I hope you'll understand that officers have had a lot on their plate, have not quite got those organised yet. So we're then moving to our official item number 2, which is declarations of interest. I'll remind you that you need to declare any disposable pecuniary interests which relate to the business on the agenda. And I'm asking members, does anybody have any declarations to make? I'm not seeing any, so we're now moving on to our item 3, which is the access to information. I do not consider that any of the items here need to go into part 2, and we need to exclude press and public. We are a public meeting, and I hope that we can continue to be so. All agreed? Thank you very much indeed. We are already therefore on to item 4. I will note that I have received notification that Councillor Williams is running late. Councillor Williams, as he is not here for the present, for the opening of the arguments here, will not be eligible to vote on this matter. So he will join us for item 5 as and when we get there. So item 4, can I ask the officer to start the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application on Summerland Street between Red Lion Lane and Verney Street. It's an application for 145 units of co-living accommodation arranged over 5 and 6 stories. The application has been amended since it was first received to reduce the overall height by 1 story and to reduce the number of co-living beds from 167 to 145. There has been an update sheet with some amendments to the committee report just to outline in greater detail the design review that was conducted at pre-application stage, and also to draw your attention to the BREEAM excellent rating that the building is designed to. So it's not far from the Civic Centre. Many people are familiar with the site. So Summerland Street goes between Sibwell Street and drops down to Western Way. The site is outlined in red on the plan in front of you, so it is on the screen. It's on the northeast side of Summerland Street between Red Lion Lane and Verney Street. To the northwest of the site, on the other side of Red Lion Lane, the conservation and Sibwell's conservation area extends to include the terrace of Victorian properties. And on the other side of Sibwell Street is the Methodist Church, and we'll see that in photographs later on with its prominent cupola on the skyline of Sibwell Street. So an aerial view of the site, which is in the centre of the screen, currently occupied by 3 commercial units, single and 2-storey, and occupying the full footprint of the site. To the northeast of the site, you can see the adjoining flats, Wheaton House and Ackland House, which adjoin the site. And you can see the small courtyard at the rear of the pale central windscreen unit in the centre of the application site. This is a view from a photo from Verney Street, showing the existing buildings on the site, a 2-storey on the corner with Summerland Street, and then a high single commercial story as it moves back into Verney Street adjacent to the house. From Summerland Street, back towards the same corner, and on the left you can see the cupola of the Methodist Church rising above the buildings that are within the conservation area. And on the site is the 3 units which are in the centre of that picture. So looking back down from further up Verney Street and looking down Red Lion Lane, you see Wheaton House, the flats approximately 10 years old in the behind the site, and the site being the 2 larger pitch roof commercial units and the units currently a supermarket in the foreground. So looking back on Red Lion Lane, back towards the site, Wheaton House is the building on the left, site in the foreground, and Summerland Street in the background. The student housing block is constructed beyond that. This is a photograph looking northeast. Up Bampard Street, you can see the site in the middle ground at the far side of Summerland Street. You can see the windscreen unit, former windscreen unit. In the centre of that picture, you can see Wheaton House and Acton House. Behind it, the green and white flats. So just to give you an idea of the massing of the buildings, we've got the Sidwell Street in the bottom left of that picture, and Summerland Street running diagonally across it. Summerland Street and the building front onto it, you can see the recessed ground floor entrance, and you can see ground floor plus 4 stories on the Red Lion side and ground floor plus 5 on the Burnley Street side. So the top of these elevations is an elevation of Summerland Street. It's the mixed materials of the central part of the building with the entrance highlighting the contrasting material and predominantly brick for the other facades. And the lower elevation there is from the rear, it's from Wheaton and Acton House. And these are the side elevations. So on the top one here is Verney Street, with Summerland Street on the left and the student house of the depot on the left-hand side of the road there. Acton House on the right in white. And the bottom one is from Red Lion Lane, Wheaton House on the left, and Summerland Street on the right of the building. Sections through the building. And this is the ground floor. Summerland Street across the bottom of the picture, the entrance central to that recessed. Ground floor comprising service and communal accommodation. So there is workspaces, lounge spaces, cinema room, laundry, and so on, and private dining spaces. It's the first floor. So on the first of 4th floors, completely residential accommodation. You can see the flat roof above the communal accommodation, the green planting, and that forms a light well court to allow light into the rooms and to create space at the rear of the building. That acts as an extension to the small courtyard in Wheaton House and Acton House. So these are typical arrangements of rooms. You can see left and right there are wheelchair accessible units. So there are 9 of those in the building, and they are slightly larger. The majority of units, 118 in total, are 20 square metres, and then there are a smaller number of units that are below between 17 and 20 square metres. Moving up through the building, so the 2nd, 3rd and 4th floors are residential accommodation, and then the 5th floor is split. So on the left-hand side, on the Red Lion side, there is a roof terrace, and there is space for solar panels on the roof. And that part of the building is 5 stories with that on the roof. And then the 6th floor only on the Verney Street and part of the Summerland Street facade. And the green space you can see is a communal kitchen with direct access onto the roof space. And that's a roof plan to show. So you see the solar panels on the roof, as well as the roof terrace level. These are elevations in context across Summerland Street in the top. The side elevations from Red Lion and Verney Street below that, and then the rear elevation, the elevation Wheaton and Acton House to the bottom. Cross sections of the building shows relationship to its neighbours. And some community generated imagery looking back from Sidwell Street, the building in the middle ground. Looking from Verney Street, at the site at the end, chasing the green Acton House. Looking up Summerland Street. A couple of longer range views. This is from West Avenue, where you can see the position of the building dotted. It's behind the church and behind the Sidwell Street Ridge. You can see how the top level of the building would appear behind the cupola of the Methodist Church. The upper part of the cupola would still be on the skyline. And this is looking from sort of 10 metres to the right-hand side of the War Memorial, outside church in Newtown. And again, the building is dotted in white, and the cupola of the church is actually hidden behind the tree. But if you look at it from the War Memorial, you would appear in the foreground of the Methodist Church cupola, but you would still see the cupola just above the roof line. This may be useful to a discussion of the application. This is the floor plan when Wheaton House and Ackland House were given planning permission, to show that a building on this site, on the left-hand side of this drawing, was anticipated. It's shown on all the floor plans, so there was no indication what height it was anticipated, but it is the footprint of the building, which is largely the form we see today with this application, with a courtyard that extends the courtyard of Wheaton and Ackland House, was anticipated at that stage. We do see a number of rooms, particularly in the centre, Wheaton and Ackland House, which face into that courtyard, single aspect flats, and as the report discusses, they will be subject of loss of direct light, but also significant reduction in diffuse light to those flats. So they have kitchen and diner, a bedroom each. They're each one bedroom flats. It's on 4 floors. There are 12 flats in that central courtyard that are affected in that way. And then there are other lesser reduction in sunlight from the flats that are facing outwards towards Red Line and Burney Street. And there are some minor loss of light to the rear of buildings on Red Lion Lane, Burney Street, and also to the student accommodation opposite. So this is the elevations of that planning permission permitted, and on the top there you can see a section, an elevation looking into the courtyard between this development and Wheaton House and Ackland House. The windows that face the site, so the smaller windows in that elevation are bedroom windows. The larger windows, the full height windows, are the living room, dining room, kitchen spaces. So the benefits of the scheme: the generation of a very sustainably located brownfield site that is currently underused and attractive. The benefits being the provision of 145 units of co-living accommodation, 20% of which will be affordable private rent. And the identified harms are the reduction in natural light and privacy to the neighbouring dwellings of Wheaton and Ackland House, and the less than substantial harm to the setting of considerable conservation area in the Grade 2 listed Methodist Church. A number of contributions towards pedestrian and cycle improvements in the vicinity of the site, affordable housing, 20% of the units would be private affordable rent, 56,000 towards parks and the improvement of facilities in the existing parks. No new open space, public open space created, but the idea is to improve the ability of those spaces to accommodate users, need uplifting use, travel plan, traffic orders, management plans for co-living, and a still contribution. So the NPBF sets out the planning decisions. There should be a presumption in favour of sustainable development. It's considered that the benefits of this development, as listed previously, outweigh those identified harms, and on balance, the application should be approved. The recommendation is to delegate to officers to grant planning permission, subject to the legal agreement and the conditions listed in the planning committee report.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, I'm now going to invite members to offer questions to Howard on his presentation. I'll start with Councillor Vizard, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Howard. It's a very clear presentation. A couple of questions, possibly 3, if that's allowed. Firstly, on the loss of light and the impact on Wheaton House and Ackland House, what, in your estimation, how many stories would be tolerable before there was any loss of light that was within acceptable or guidance limits would there be, and how many flats are impacted in those blocks?
I think if you reduce this building, you have to go quite a long way before you get a significant impact. As you reduce it, you would start to improve the situation in the uppermost story, but it is 4 stories. So you'd have to reduce it a very long way to, almost to the existing levels, not to have, any significant impact. At the moment, Wheaton House and Ackland House face southwest. They are open in the southwest aspect because there are very low buildings on that side of the site. So they have very good direct sunlight and very good light levels. So any significant development on the site would start to impact on those light levels. And it is noticeable actually the ground floor of Wheaton House and Acton House are already shaded by the existing buildings. Their situation, the flank, whilst the light wouldn't be improved, the flank wall would be slightly lower than it is now. It's from the first floor upwards that it's significantly affected, but taking 2 stories off would give you some benefit to the upper floor, but wouldn't give you much benefit at all to the next floor down.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm pressing both and only one's coming on, so I hope I can still be heard. I appreciate, just to follow on from that, what the applicant has said in terms of viability on that point, so I may ask them about that. The other question related to the additions to the committee reports in relation to the design review panel comments. I know it's just a question about timing, really, when that panel sat. So in terms of their comments about the height and not feeling able to comment. So I'm just looking back at whether, unable to confirm whether the proposed height of the building was acceptable. And it also gave advice on further consideration matters of townscape, configuration of accommodation and elevations, height and massing. When was that guidance given? Was it before the proposals reduced by a story or after? Has there been any further comments from the applicant following this? Thank you.
The application, well, the proposed development was presented at a very early stage, conceptual design stage, and the comments were given on the information that was provided. So there were alternative massings being considered at that stage. It wasn't in the form that it finally came in, and it hasn't been back to design review panel during the application or in a more detailed design phase.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. Councillor Jobson. Councillor.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Vizard's first question, reducing the height is one way of dealing with the light situation. The other would be to reduce the size of the building, giving more space between the existing buildings and the current one. How much would have to be increased before that? And I do have one other question as well, if I may. No, that's my fault.
I think simply reducing the thickness of the building, the width of each element, I think would give very marginal change to the light levels. I don't think the angle of the sunlight would the degree to which sunlight would be improved, I think would be very, very marginal simply from thinning the ranges.
The second one is, I can't find anything about contribution to health services by way of section 106. I'm assuming there will be one because 145 people minimum would pose considerable strain on the health service in the area.
We did consult the NHS. They didn't request a contribution. We did check that with them and they confirmed they wouldn't be requesting a contribution in this case.
Councillor Mitchell and then Councillor Miller.
3 points, if I might. First of all, I understand there is a nightclub in the immediate vicinity of this development and is currently facing empty or non-residential property. On one of the slides you showed us, it appeared that a large windowed area of residential accommodation might be facing the nightclub area. And I'm just wondering if there's any concern on immediately for new residents and noise problems in regard to that, and whether that's been considered. Secondly, in relation to the light question, assuming this was a similar argument made when the other buildings, Acton, etc., were built further along the same road, so why is it in this particular building we're building to a higher level than the other 2 buildings? If presumably there was a light issue with the previous buildings and we agreed the height of the previous buildings, now we apparently appear on one block to be going higher. And the third point relates to your comments on page 8 about community balance. You point out to us that the area's got a large number of flatted housing and a proportion of student accommodation in the area. And you're saying that this type of accommodation would not render an over concentration in this particular area. Whilst it's not an over concentration of build type, it is an over concentration, I believe, of single person accommodation. And isn't that a factor we should be taking into account when in relation to not the type of buildings, but the people who are living in the community? Thank you.
In terms of the nightclub, yes, the noise from the nightclub has been considered in the acoustic reports, and the building has been designed to reflect that. In terms of the building heights, we do need to judge each on its merits. So this building has come down a story from when it came to us, and we have to judge it on what is presented to us rather than what might have been considered in the past. So it is judged on its merits. And in terms of an over concentration, I do take the point, but this is a different type of accommodation. I think it's targeted at a slightly different demographic. So yes, it might be single person's accommodation, but I do think that would bring in a slightly different range of people from the existing. I don't think there is a reason for refusal here of over concentration.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify how many dining and cooking spaces there were.
So the accommodation is laid out with two communal kitchens. So they are on the ground floor and on the uppermost floor. When originally submitted, it'd have a small kitchen on each floor. The applicant thinks that the better way would be to present this with two larger kitchens, which are likely to be more sociable. So we don't have a standard about how that should be laid out. We have in the past taken a view that it would be better to have kitchens small on each floor, but this is a slightly smaller co-living block than we've seen with the ones I've dealt with recently. And in discussion with the applicant, they are very firmly of the view that actually a larger kitchen is going to be more sociable, have more facilities in it, more likely to be used. We don't have anything to strongly counter that argument, so we've been happy to support it. The amount of kitchen space in floor area does exceed the London plan standards, so at least.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Any Councillor Ketch?
Um, 20% affordable housing, the rationale for that as opposed to 35%, which I think is the council's target.
So the council has a target for market housing at 35%. The government has set the target for build to rent type accommodation at 20% nationally. So that is a nationally promoted standard through national guidance.
Do we have any other questions of the officer, please, on this presentation? In that case, I'm looking first of all for Standing Order 44, and I have no names. So then I would like to call on the objector, please. Now, Georges Petru, are you here? So thank you very much indeed for coming. Welcome. In order to speak, you need to press both of the buttons. Please take your time and relax about starting. But once you have started, I'm afraid you're limited to 3 minutes. Okay, thank you very much.
There's quite a lot, so you have to speak quite quickly.
My name is George Petrio. I'm a resident at Ackland House, speaking on behalf of residents who will be adversely affected by the proposed development. We object to the development due to overshadowing and impact on light reaching the neighbouring buildings, overlooking, causing privacy concerns, and the development size and scale. We object to the new plan because it will drastically reduce our access to sunlight and daylight. 8 properties will lose a total of 100% winter annual probable sunlight hours, which is not compliant with BRE guidelines, and daylight will be reduced far below recommended levels. There's been no attempt to mitigate the impact on light for the residents at the front of Ackland House through the design of the building. We object to the plan because the windows from the new development will be directly overlooking ours, meaning tenants will be able to look straight into our properties, thus diminishing our privacy and changing the way we inhabit our properties. The proposal will be significantly overbearing as it is 6 stories with additional infrastructure on the top, whereas the buildings between Verney Street and Weston Way are much lower, between 1 and 4 stories high. The increasing height of the proposal of 6 stories at the Verney Street end is not in keeping with the surroundings and lay of the land, which decreases in the height down to the junction with Weston Way. The removal of the top dormer level would help improve this. Statement from 17 Ackland House. My privacy will be impacted negatively, causing me to have to draw my curtains to protect it. Losing 100% of my winter sunlight will impact my health because I experience depression and SAD. The development may decrease the value of my flat. I'm a counsellor and work from home, so the potential demolition and construction of the new development will deprive me of a quiet place to work, thus impacting my business. Statement from 10 Ackland House. I've lived at 10 Ackland House on the 1st floor since 2014. I'm disabled, I have an injured nervous system, and I'm often on the ground screaming, retching, having seizures in terror, and on the edge of suicide. I can't take any stimulation, noise, or activity, or go to hospital. I need quiet, and my flat is currently silent. If people start knocking down buildings feet away from my only door and window, I'm laid down there 24/7, often in underwear because I'm burning up. I need the doors and windows open, even in winter. There will be dust and dirt everywhere, noise, people feet away. My nervous system will not take it, and I can see it could result in my death. When built, the light will be gone. Statement from 2 Ackland House. We will lose 100% of natural daylight. Our living area's windows are in the form of patio doors, and we would be unable to open these or even the curtains due to privacy and potential safety concerns. There's no critical need for housing in this area and many suitable locations to build such accommodation, like the disused police station.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Petru. Well done for managing that. I much appreciate your effort in there. Please remain seated for the moment.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to invite members to ask you questions on your statement. Members, anybody wish to ask a question? Councillor Ketch.
Pardon? Oh, sorry.
Thanks for your presentation. I was just going to ask it was known prior to Ackland House and Wheaton House being sort of constructed that there's a sort of a horseshoe-shaped sort of probable residential building due to be built. Given the knowledge of that prior, what do you think is a reasonable construction on that site?
Something that wouldn't overshadow to the degree that the potential development will, because it's going to be significant. 100% of kind of winter sunlight will be gone for pretty much everybody facing that direction. Well, everybody facing that direction.
That's good. Anybody else have any questions, Mr. Petru? In that case, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. And now have a speaker speaking in support of the application, Mr. Bruce Ruddle. Sorry, Bruce Ruddle. Again, so please settle down and take your time in getting ready. But once you do start, you need to press both the buttons and wait till the light goes red, and then please, you'll be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you to the Chair and the Committee for the opportunity to speak on the proposal at Summerland Street. I'm Bruce Ruddle, Development Director at McLaren. I'm delighted to bring forward this application, which is recommended for approval. The plans will provide high-quality co-living apartments for rent, delivering much-needed opportunities for young professionals and key workers to live in the city. 20% of the units will be affordable rent, with 5% designed as accessible units. The design will achieve BREEAM Excellent, EPC A accreditations, as well as 100% improvement in biodiversity. On-site renewable heat and energy generation is provided via air source heat pumps and PV panels. Each unit is self-contained, including its own kitchen facilities, shower room, private living and dining spaces, double bed and storage. Residents will benefit from 740 square metres of shared internal amenity space, including communal kitchens and health and wellbeing facilities, and an outdoor roof terrace of 165 square metres. The internal communal space equates to 5 square metres per bed. By contrast, comparable developments in Exeter only provide approximately 2.7 square metres of space. McLaren have undertaken a rigorous consultation process with City Council officers, with input from local consultees. The scheme has been presented to the design review panel and comments incorporated and adopted where possible. The changes resulted in a significant reduction in height and massing and various improvements to the internal and external design. The Heritage Officer has confirmed that the reduction in height results in reduced harm and concludes that an objection on the height of the building and any impact on the heritage assets would be unsustainable. McLaren acknowledges the comments regarding daylight, and as well as significantly reducing the scale of the building, the layout and form of the scheme includes a courtyard to mitigate the impact to existing flats. Impacts on adjacent properties are typical of urban redevelopment, and the design has mitigated this as far as possible. Any further reduction would not be viable and would not make best use of this city centre site. It is also important to highlight that the development of Ackland and Wheaton House, adjacent to the proposed scheme, were developed with an expectation of the development of this site. Exeter offices have undertaken a detailed assessment of McLaren's proposals and have concluded that the benefits of the development outweigh the identified harms. McLaren have worked proactively to accommodate changes and improvements, leading to the officers to a position of recommending the scheme for approval. We look forward to progressing this regeneration scheme and our investment in Exeter City. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Again, congratulations on keeping within your 5 minutes.
I'm now going to ask members if they have any questions for Mr. Ruttle. Councillor Jobson first, then Councillor Vizard, and then Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. It said here that there are going to be 18 rooms between 16 and 20 square metres. I've been into a unit where the room was only 19.1 square metres, and it was nothing more effectively than a corridor between the bed and the shelving to the window with a tiny table and a seat, 16 square metres, which will include presumably a shower facility, sink, loo, self-contained kitchen. I mean, what are they going to do? Float across this space? Because they ain't going to be able to walk across it, not have any sort of space where they can chill silently to themselves, shall we say. So I was wondering, don't you think that all the rooms should be at least 20 square metres with none smaller? Some would say that that was too small. And really, the draft London guidance is of no significance in Exeter. London can do what they like. We would rather Exeter people had space in which to live, and think that, well, certainly some of us feel that forcing too many corridor properties into such small spaces is probably not good for people's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jobson. Do you want to respond to that?
Certainly about these square metres, yeah.
Yeah, both buttons, please.
Certainly completely understood on the London guidance, but London guidance is the only guidance that currently has anything defined for co-living. It's an exceptionally good benchmark. From our perspective, co-living units of between 16 and 17 square metres are justifiable. They allow a different price point when it comes to rental levels. If you create an entire scheme generated of exactly the same unit type, you're not going to be able to have differentiating of rents. So in actual fact, having slightly smaller rooms and slightly larger rooms allows an opportunity for potential occupiers to choose what type of room they have.
We're on to Councillor Vizard next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presenting to us this evening. Just turning to the issue of the loss of light, and I slightly take issue with your comment that it's unsustainable objection. I'm not sure that's quite what the guidance says. It needs to be balanced. But just on that point, in terms of when you talk about viability of the scheme, if you were to remove further units or stories, what do you actually mean by that? It's a word we hear a lot, but in terms of would you walk away because you simply can't make profit from a 5-story building, or is it more subtle than that? It'd just be useful to get an idea of what that actually means.
There are a number of elements.
So I must ask you.
There are a number of elements associated with viability. The first one is that this is actually a freehold property that's owned by Exeter City Council, and there is a requirement on us to deliver a certain number of units within that lease that we have with Exeter City Council. So a significant reduction in the number of units would mean that we wouldn't be able to take that opportunity forward with Exeter City Council. Secondly, as the officer indicated, to mitigate the harm associated with daylight sunlight, you would need a very, very substantial reduction in the height of the building. And to all intents and purposes, you end up with exactly what's there at the moment, which is a single-story development. We've been encouraged through the design process to ensure that there are no residential units at ground floor. So the reality is to try and mitigate any harm caused to daylight sunlight. You're not going to end up with any development there whatsoever. So the scheme would not come forward.
Thank you. All right, sorry, will you Councillor Mitchell, yes, you're next. Thank you.
Just some clarification, I think, if you could assist us. Both in your remarks and in the email you sent around, McLaren sent around, not that you personally sent around, there's a description of the users of this property. And so I'd just like you to re-emphasise for us, for the sake of clarity, that this property is solely aimed at young professionals and key workers in the community, and is not aimed at or intended for student occupation.
That's correct.
Sorry, second point is, I'm somewhat confused by some of the terminology we're using here. We go from housing to accommodation, and now we're suddenly talking about apartments. By the look of the definition again in your letter, it looks like a room with component parts in it. To me, an apartment is several rooms linked together. So could you actually clarify what a set of accommodation for a person would physically look like?
Every unit within the scheme will contain its own bathroom pod, its own kitchen facilities. It will have its own double bed. It will have a dining area. It will have a seating area, and it will have storage within it.
By pods, you don't mean rooms.
No, a pod is the bathroom.
Like our homeless pods.
Councillor Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I'm just wondering about the management arrangements for this building. So is there an on-site manager?
Yes, it will be professionally managed. There'll be 24/7 management on site.
Thank you. And a second question, if I may. Just wondered about the roof garden, roof terrace. Is there any expectation that there will be that will be closed at a certain point at night time? Is that going to be open at all times?
That will be very much up to the operational management company that's put in place. Clearly, if there were any unsociable activities happening on the roof, then a regime would be brought in where the roof terrace is closed at certain times.
Thank you. If nobody else got any questions, I've got a question for you, Mr. Ruddle. You are talking about the fact that there are different price points for your different rooms, which seems to be based on the size. Can you tell us if the 20% affordable rent is going to be across the spectrum of rents, or is it simply going to be the small apartments that will be the reduced rent or the market rent?
The expectation is that the affordable units will be across a spectrum of the apartments, not just the smallest units.
Thank you. Councillor Ketch.
With regard to the communal shared spaces, can you guarantee, as part of the scheme, that there will be no surcharges associated with them at any point during the management of this, or the selling on of management to a further service provider?
Certainly, the expectation is for there to be no additional management charges for the use of any of the spaces for the residents of that building. I can't obviously guarantee for the duration and the lifespan of that building that would not be the case, but certainly during our development and the way co-living is managed in the current economic climate, there are no surcharges for any of the residents.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members? Councillor Jobson.
Yes, I do apologise. I should have asked it first time round. It followed on from what you were saying. Are these going to be for single occupancy only? Because in one block that I have seen, whilst it's described as rooms, they are being used by dual occupancy.
There is no definitive restriction on them being used for either solely a single occupant or dual occupancy.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, please, from members? Yeah, Councillor Vizard.
Sorry, actually a question for our officers, if I may, just with. I suggest you leave that for debate. Is that okay? So I'll do it then. Thank you.
If there are no further questions for Mr. Lovell, thank you for your time, Zach, and you can
Thank you.
You'll see back in the public gallery. Right. Okay. So I'm now going to move us into debate. Sorry, you're going to sum it. No, director's going to sum up first. Okay. Right. So you can sum up after the debate. Director, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Chair. We've heard some very powerful statements there from people on behalf of the residents of Ackland House and Wheaton House, particularly around the impact on the amenity. We've heard there from the developer as well, in terms of the significant changes that have been made to the application during its lifetime, in terms of reducing story height and changes to those internal arrangements. The applicants also raised that issue that officers have raised about there was an expectation, or there is an expectation, that there will be some kind of development in this location. I think the photographs there of the existing site kind of point to that as well. So I'd also say as well, in our emerging local plan, which is just today, it was the last day of consultation on the Exeter plan, does actually recognise that co-living does make a valuable contribution to addressing Exeter's housing needs. And we've had this debate, haven't we, a number of times now. What is co-living? You can see that some members of the committee still uncomfortable with the notion of co-living. There's no standard layout or policy guidance that we have for co-living. We do look towards the London plan as an established set of guidance, because there's a lot of co-living in London, and I think in a city, doesn't matter whether the city's called London or Exeter or Bristol, it's living in a city environment, and the co-living offer is that kind of city living offer that is attractive for young people who are in between or coming out of being a student, getting on the jobs ladder before they decide to sort of commit to a more sort of permanent type of living. So they're homes. They're different types of homes, and there are many of them. This is just one type of home. So I think that's really important. I think the question here is about planning balance, isn't it? There's a really clear balance to be struck here. The benefits of that kind of living accommodation that we say is needed in a city like Exeter on a brownfield site in an obvious development location within the city centre. Those benefits against what has been identified as harm. The officer's report sets out in some detail for you the sort of technical issues around the loss of daylight and furthermore impact in terms of overlooking privacy as well. So it does come down to that kind of striking that right balance. And it's a difficult, it always is a difficult balance. Officers, you see in our report, we say the balance does come down in terms of recommending approval, and that is taking into account all the issues that we've heard from both the objector, but also those powerful statements from people who are living in adjoining properties at Ackland House and Wheaton House. So taken all of those on board really, really carefully, taken on board the fact that a growing city like Exeter does need a range of accommodation. This is an obvious, clearly an obvious site for redevelopment in that context. So it comes down to that planning balance that you've heard. We've given you some guidance. It's laid out for you in the report, and we've all heard the statements for and against. There's nothing more I can help you with. It's for you now to wrestle with those difficult issues about planning balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. So I'm going to move us now into debate, but I am aware just before we start, Councillor Patrick, that Councillor Vizard had a point of information to ask.
Thank you. Yes, and obviously I would have raised it at the where we were asking questions of our officers, but it arose from the answer given by the supporter, in that there's a to do with the freehold that the city council owns, that there was a number of units, minimum number of units, which would need to be reached before it became viable. Do we know what number that is and what impacts how that would impact the number of stories that could be taken out before that was met? Thank you.
I'll ask the Director to answer that, please.
I think you've raised an important question of clarification, Councillor Vizard. In determining any planning application, we take no account of the ownership. That's irrelevant to the planning consideration. So we haven't had any conversations with the applicant about that because it's not relevant to our consideration. So we're completely blind to the fact that obviously we knew that the City Council owns a field, but we're blind to it in terms of our professional assessment of those planning merits.
Clarification on the same point. On page 11 of the report, we've got a history of the site where previous planning application had been approved. Can you tell us at the stage of November 2013 whether the site was at that time in the ownership of Exeter City Council and similar conditions would have applied to that previous application?
Do you want to answer that? Which one did we?
Yeah. No, I wasn't aware at that time. I dealt with the application. I wasn't aware it was City Council freehold. It may be that the freehold is not of all of this site, but certainly a scheme was permitted which was 5 stories, and that's on the Red Lion, and that was reduced from 6 because on that point that was 6 was found to be unacceptable in that location, and that mirrors the scheme we've got here where you've got that 5-story element.
Yeah, I do want to move us into debate. So final comment, please, from the Director.
I think if that same question it relates to viability, then the thing to note as well is that we've not received a
viability assessment for that, because the applicant is proposing to meet the policy on affordable. It's only when we're in a situation where there's a non-compliant affordable housing offer that we're into that viability, and where we would seek a viability appraisal. So it's another, almost doubling up on what I said earlier, that we haven't had those conversations really because they're not relevant.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I really do want to move us into debate now. I want contributions, please, from members. I'm going to start with Councillor Patrick, please.
My question was actually a follow up from that. That was my original question anyway. I was confused by that comment on the lease, the freehold. So should we just ignore that section of the supporters? The supporters' answer that we should just
my short
disregard
answer to that will be yes,
Okay,
because
thanks.
it is not relevant to our discussion. What we should be looking at is the application before us. We've heard some very moving statements from objectors. We have heard some very pragmatic arguments from the proposer. So I want us to please to contribute with our debate. Does anybody want to?
I think the main point is highlighted in paragraph 3. We've got the perceived nature of permitted development on this site, the suitable development for the site, not an issue. The issue is, for me, and I don't know about others, the issue of the light issue here, whether we are doing the best we can for the community who live in the neighbourhood in regard to the light issue. Because once permitted and once built, this is an issue these people in the adjacent area will be living with permanently. And at the moment, I'm not reassured from what I've read on the balance that the light argument to me is extremely important. And I'd like again to hear from the officers why they think it is not an overwhelming issue that we should be refusing on rather than accepting on.
I think that really I can take what I've heard from the officers, which is they're saying that any building there at all, anything at all, is going to overshadow. That the existing building, which is 2-story highs, is already taking some of the light out from the ground floors. My sort of take from what's been said is that this is a consequence of there being a building there, and there was always going to be a building there. But do you want, Councillor Mitchell, a specific response from the officer?
In effect, the argument is mitigation factors would make the site unviable, etc. So whatever happens on that site, in effect, there will be some impact of light upon the neighbourhood, in effect, is what we're being told.
That's well, I agree, yes, with what you're saying there. Councillor Patrick.
Yes, for me, the issue of the light is the most concerning. We've got different sort of numbers coming out of today. So, Mr. Petru raised a number of 100% of loss of winter light. In the report, we're seeing slightly lower figures. So, can we just have some sort of, clarity or confirmation of where sort of think it was up to 80% came from, how that was realised, and whether it's possible that 100% is more accurate?
The issue I've got here is that these questions really should have been raised at the time when we were questioning officers. We're now going to get into a situation where in the debate we keep referring back to officers. I am going to allow that.
I'll rephrase that. My concern is that we have concern that there will be up to 100% loss of winter light, which is significant. Obviously, that there is a contradiction between that and the report. So that's my contribution to that.
I understand what you're saying, so I am going to ask again if we can go back to the officer and ask Howard, are you prepared, please, to try and explain the light measurements?
Yes, there's a number of different ways you can measure light. So direct light, for example. So in the case of Acton House and Wheaton House, at the moment there's a low building, they get direct light even when the sun's at a very low level. You put a building next to it, you take away the direct light, they will lose direct light, and 100% is quoted in the winter. That's not incorrect. Those lower flats will lose light in the winter. There's ways of measuring light inside rooms. If you take a very detailed view, where does the skyline come? How far back in the room do you actually get, sunlight on the floor? And there's vertical sky component, which is a technical measure of diffuse light in the room, which we think is a better way of measuring light in an urban situation. So that is the measure that's reported in the report, and there are very substantial reductions in diffuse light. A lot of it's actually direct, but we think that measure of diffuse light is, in an urban situation, what is the general light level in the room? And there are very substantial reductions in that light level in these buildings. It was anticipated there'd be something built next door. They say Wheaton House and Acton House, they're built 6 meters off the boundary. This building has a slightly broader footprint, but it stands at 18 or 20 meters face to face across an inner court. So there is within the building research establishment's technical guidance on light levels, there is an allowance for, is the neighbour that's being affected badly, are they a good neighbour themselves? And actually, the building next door has built closer to the boundary and is leaving most of the work in terms of creating a courtyard for air and light and outlook to this site. So there are ways of saying, well, if you mirrored it, what would the situation be? And actually, if you mirrored Acton House and Wheatland House exactly as they are across the boundary, you'd end up with a 12-metre courtyard and 4-metre buildings either side. You'd still end up with a very poor situation in light levels for the lower floor and a very much worse situation in outlook. So we think that what is reported was in the report where we talk about DSC or vertical sky components about diffuse light. And yes, that is much reduced, substantially reduced. And as you go down the building, it is reduced more and more. But in an urban situation where that building stands at that position to the boundary, we think there's a harm there. We have to balance that against the benefits. And on balance, we don't deny that harm. But on balance, we say, we're in favour.
Thank you, Howard. Councillor Jobs.
Thank you. I think one has to look at the words that are in the report at the beginning before you read all the detail. And that is talking about on page 5, reduction in direct sunlight, substantial reduction, 30 to 80% of direct sunlight in summer. These are people's homes. They've invested in those homes. We heard the individual stories as given by Mr. Petru. But it cannot easily be said that these people who live there should have to accept such a substantial reduction. A very substantial reduction in diffuse light levels will be experienced by those dwellings. Had 28 flats been put up back in 2013, it is probable, looking at the size and scale of this building, that it wouldn't have been as broad. It might have been as high, but there would have been a lot more space between it and Acton House. And I don't think you can compare the two. Because it goes on to the second point, which is that the windows of the bedrooms are less than the 22 metre separation set out in the Exeter local plan, 17.9 metres for 3 flats, 20.5 metres from 9 flats. That's 17.9 to 22 metres is that's nearly 15 foot. That is a very considerable loss of distance between the units, and I think that has to be taken into account. I am concerned that it is not absolutely clear that these will be for single occupancy only. That effectively means that if there is no restriction, there could be 280 people living in this very cramped space, where there would be, it would seem from all I have read about the plans and the sizes, totally inadequate community space if people want to use it. We know that the one co-living block that is up and running, certainly just before Christmas, was nowhere near full occupation. It was at 28 point something, I think it was. They were interviewing other prospective tenants, but they weren't giving any clarity that it was going to be filled up shortly after Christmas. I still don't think that there is any detailed analysis as to whether we need the hundreds of these co-living units that are proposed. We know from the length of the leases that they are largely for transient occupation and not for permanent occupation. We know that if somebody becomes pregnant while they live in one, that they can't stay there for very long. I think that we really do need to put at the heart of this, the loss of light of the residents, as I say, who have invested in Exeter and whose homes these are and may have been for some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jobson. And any other members wish to contribute? Councillor Vizard.
Well, I'm going to listen to the debate because it's a tricky one, and then come in. But I will come in and then listen to any remaining debate after that. So I'm not going to declare which way I'm going to vote at this point. I do really want to hear people's views. I think this is clearly a developable site, a brownfield site suitable in the city centre. I think there are lots of things in its favour in terms of BREEAM excellence, in terms of biodiversity gains, the NHS very supportive comments to this application, I've noted. And I think this type of accommodation is suitable. I don't agree with Councillor Jobson on the point on co-living. We can have a debate about that, and we do, and we will continue to, but that's not a material consideration for this specific application. On the other hand, this loss of light issue is clearly, it is substantial. That's what it states, very substantial. And I do agree with Councillor Jobson on that point. And we do need to remember too that I think it's very easy to sort of dismiss flats as just lots of people in flats, but these are people with homes just like anybody else in Exeter. So we do need to pay real attention to the concerns of residents in Wheaton House and Ackland House, which I know very well, and I know there is quite this is an intensely developed area already. It's a city centre area. It brings with it lots of issues, and I think adding to that burden on existing residents is something we need to take very, very carefully. So I am very divided on this. It is in my ward, which obviously it brings it close to home for me, but I'm going to make a decision not on that, but on that balance, which I will continue to think about over the remaining seconds or minutes I get before I decide which way to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. Members? Councillor Warwick.
Yeah, I think similar to a debate we had at the last planning meeting, I think the issue here is what we do. The brown sites, I think we established at that time, the brownfield sites are very precious, and what we do with them, we have to do as much as we can with them, because otherwise it means tearing up the countryside that's going on in my ward at the moment. But I must admit, I am conflicted when it comes to building something that then impinges on other people, and I think that is a difficulty, and that's something that we need to weigh up in our minds as to, you know, what that actually means for people who are already living in that area, and I'm a bit like Councillor Vizard. I'm conflicted on this, because on one hand I think it's very important that I represented low-paid workers, and you know, a lot of those low-paid workers were single people for many years, and one of the big difficulties that they always had was finding accommodation within Exeter, and then that causes issues because we can't recruit people to do the jobs that we want within the city. So it's more complex than just about housing. It's about the whole way that we service the city as well. And if the housing market, without going into kind of big political debate about that, wasn't in the way that it's run, if you like, and I'm not going to make any political comments about that, don't think this is the right place, then maybe we wouldn't have to look at these kind of solutions. But these are the kind of solutions that I think we're stuck with now. And I must admit, I'm trying to weigh up the same as Councillor Vizard. You know, I wouldn't want to deny. On one hand, I wouldn't want to deny anybody, you know, their living conditions, the light, for a good living condition. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want to deny anybody the opportunity to find suitable accommodation in Exeter. So, like Councillor Vizard, at the moment, I'm still weighing it up in my mind.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Any other contributions? Councillor Natasha.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everyone who's saying about the light issue. The one thing that's slightly tipping me towards supporting this is probably the fact that if all three sites had been developed at exactly the same time, we wouldn't be facing this discussion now, because they would have all been ending up with the same amount of, well, not loss of light, but lack of light, or however much light they would be getting. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If I can make my contribution, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing what is a sustainable development. It's on a brownfield site. We need to build accommodation on this site. Although it is perhaps a little bit of an incorrect analogy, I'm thinking more of the situation where you have a large housing development and you buy the first house on that development and you're walking in and it's all lovely, a clear area, yes, with some construction going on, and then slowly everything gets built all around you. Or perhaps moving into an estate where one of the conditions is that a community centre or a pub is going to end up being built there, and then after you're moving in there, complaining effectively about the noise or the disruption. The comments from the objectors were very emotional and very compelling, but are exactly that, emotional. And that's where I feel that I am going to be looking purely at the documentation in front of me and looking at what I consider to be a sustainable development, and one which has a considerable impact on those people who already have accommodation nearby. But overall, the balance I am in favour of. That's my contribution. Do I have any other comments or contributions from members? Okay, so I'm now calling for an indicative vote on the proposal in front of us that we grant planning permission subject to the conditions stated. So I'm asking for those in favour, please, to raise their hands. Oh, it's all right. Yes, of course, I need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor. Yes, seconded by Councillor Fashion. All right, those in favour, can you please indicate? And those against, please indicate. Do I have any abstentions? I'm looking at those figures. I see 6 in favour and 4 against. The motion is therefore carried. Thank you very much indeed for your attention to this matter. We'll have a brief pause, please. I invite Councillor Williams to join the committee. We will literally whilst we're perhaps and air the brain cells. Item number 5, the planning application for Exeter House, Tudor Street in Exeter. Can I call on the officer to make a presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is another scheme for co-living. I think you'll see from the what I'm going to show you that it's quite different from the previous one in terms of its characteristics and its setting. It's actually a much smaller scheme. It's 34 bedrooms. And part of it is a conversion of an existing building. Exeter House is also known as Mission Hall, so to avoid any confusion, those kind of interchangeable terms. It's down by Exbridges, and I'm going to show you a series of images which will help to hopefully explain better where it is. There you go, red line around the site. So at one end of Tudor Street, next to the bridge over Western Way, stroke Frog Street, that is part of New Bridge Street. So not far from the river and across the way from the Holiday Inn Express. So there's a closer aerial view, so you can see there is an existing building, Exeter House, with car parking in front of it. It's close to the back of the terrace fronting New Bridge Street there. So that's the front of Exeter House. I'm sure it's a view that's very familiar to most of you. So that's looking from Frog Street. So as you come off Exbridges into the city, that's a view from Tudor Street. So you can see how close it is to the back of New Bridge Street Terrace. You can't see the building itself from here, although you will be able to see the proposed extension on the front of it. So this is looking from Tudor Street with Tudor House in the foreground. And this is looking from the bridge over on New Bridge Street itself down into the site. It's somewhat unusually, it has an access into the site from New Bridge Street through a corridor in the New Bridge Street frontage there. So for that white area you can see there, you can go through there and you go down the corridor and then through a like a tunnel or some steps, enclosed steps known as Coffin's Way, which goes into the back of Mission Hall. So that's the existing site plan. So you see the existing building with the car park in front of it. And we're going to, if you can just indulge me a minute, just to talk about something about the history, because it's quite interesting, but it's also relevant to the proposal before us. This is an old plan. The orange coloured buildings are the ones that no longer exist. So you can see that there was a terrace in front of Mission Hall. So you couldn't see it from the road at that time. There's a photograph here. So you can see to get to Mission Hall, you had to go through that entrance on the right of the picture. And there was a terraced street of buildings in front of it, fronting Tudor Street. And again, I'm afraid I don't have any dates for these images. But again, you can see before the demolition of the terrace, you couldn't see Mission Hall at all. And that's an old picture of the New Bridge Street entrance. And again, this is a sort of wider historic view. Sorry, I don't have a date, from the river. So you can see, right in the centre of the picture below the church there, is where Mission Hall is, but you couldn't see it in this picture. I'm starting off with this image because I think it's a helpful way of getting an immediate grasp of what's proposed, although there is a key caveat, and that is that this view was produced as an illustrative piece of material. It's not the most up to date, and there are some aspects of this that are different now from what you see here. Essentially, the ground floor has been much reduced to address flooding issues. Otherwise, the footprint, the height, the shape of the building is exactly the same, which is why I think this image is still useful. So you can see the proposal is to add a building in front of Mission Hall, Exeter House, which is attached to it by a glazed link. This has come about as a consequence of several years worth of discussions between the applicant and officers, also involving Historic England and Environment Agency and others. And some members may recall that a couple of years ago it came to planning member working group, and members broadly supported the principle of a development like this, which built in front of the Excellent House building. Originally, the proposal was to extend Excellent House straight out, so you would lose any feeling of where that building was or the shape of it in relation to the street, but it's been significantly altered to move it to one side with the glazed link and retain the historic building's character in more evidence, and provide an area in front of it, as well as the building itself, which is an enhancement to the public realm. So you've got some planting, some higher quality surfacing, and an open area which would be accessible to the public, so with street furniture in it as well. So a significant enhancement on the surface level car park that's there at the moment. So the other images I'm about to show you, which are plans and elevations, are accurate, and should members resolve to do so, it's effectively what we're resolving to approve today. So you can see here that there is a much smaller element of ground floor to the extension part, and that's to remove any living accommodation or other accommodation that the Environment Agency were concerned about being vulnerable to flooding at the ground floor level. So you've got a series of pillars holding up the building and a more open approach at the front. So that's the southeast side elevation. That's the northwest side elevation, so the other side, so you can see the glazed link. It's quite hard to depict in a flat drawing because the extension part is an angle to the historic part of the building. Again, the front elevation, so you can see the pillared area at the front. That's from the back. Proposed site plan, a slightly closer version of the same thing. So you can see the public piazza area, which will be separate from a more clearly defined area associated with the building itself. The most recent version of this, which this is, has got a disabled parking space in it, which has then just been added, and that's referred to in your update sheet. And I've got a series of, it's got a couple of street elevations which are helpful in the sense that they give you an idea of the height and scale and mass of the building in the context of its surroundings. Again, this has changed quite a lot from the original scheme that we had, which was higher and wider. So it's been much reduced to try and be more complementary to the scale and mass of the surrounding buildings. I think actually the other one I've got here is even more helpful, perhaps in showing that in relation to its surroundings, it fits quite well. It's not especially high or dominating compared to most of the buildings around it. Just for completeness, the elevation fronting New Bridge Street with the entrance and the Coffins Way link on these drawings. And running through floor plans, I'm going to skip through these because I've got some better ones really in terms of telling you what's on each floor. So you can see here, the ground floor no longer has any living accommodation in it. It's got a lobby, a games room, a lounge, bin store, plant, laundry, parcel room, and office. And take note of those things because at the end I'll need to come on and talk about the Environment Agency's ongoing concern about some of those uses. Above that, you've got first floor 12 bedrooms in 2 blocks, one in the historic element and one in the extension, each with a kitchen. And second floor, 13 bedrooms, again 2 kitchens. And top floor with 9 bedrooms and 2 kitchens and some additional plant room. I've got a couple more illustrative views, which again come with the caveat that they show more accommodation on the ground floor of the extension than is currently proposed. But again, give you an indication of the scale, massing, appearance of the proposal. So that's a view from Newbridge Street. Another one from Frog Street. So you can see that it does allow views, albeit more glimpsed than you currently get, of the historic element. And that's it as it would front Tudor Street. So the key issues are listed there. They're all in the report, so you'll be familiar with them. There's just a couple I want to pick out there. One is the disabled parking issue, which, if you see in your updates sheet, has now been addressed. So there was no parking at all. Now there is one parking space, which is a dedicated disabled space. And the other issue, which is the big one really, is the ongoing concerns of the Environment Agency in relation to flooding. Notwithstanding the willingness of the applicant to continuously change his plans to address the Environment Agency's concerns, to take away the most vulnerable elements of the ground floor uses, the Environment Agency is currently maintaining its objection. Its key criticisms are the wording of the flood assessment submitted with the application and its failure to justify increases in the height of the building to raise the floor levels to address flooding, and the remaining plant room use on the ground floor, which it says will be vulnerable to flooding, potentially causing problems for the operation of the rest of the building. We, in discussion with the Environment Agency and with the applicant, we think we're not far off being able to reach agreement on enabling them to withdraw their objection. It needs some further contributions to the wording of the flood assessment to help the Environment Agency fully understand what's being proposed, and potentially some small changes to the internal layout of the building. Should we be able to persuade the Environment Agency to withdraw their objection without significant change to the internal layout or the external appearance of the building, we would like to ask members to agree to give us delegated authority to determine this application. If the Environment Agency are unable to withdraw their objection, then we don't feel we'd be in a position to approve this, so we would refuse it and delegate powers, should you be agreeable. If changes are required to address the Environment Agency concerns, which would significantly alter the external appearance of the building or the shape of it, or any other important issues that might affect neighbours, for example, then we would bring this back to committee. It's a bit wordy, I'm afraid. I think this is the same as what's on your update sheet, but the request is that delegated authority is given to officers in consultation with the chair as an additional check to approve this, subject to the withdrawal by the Environment Agency of its objection and to the completion of the legal agreement as set out in the original report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. I now invite members to ask questions of the presenting officer. Councillor Jobson.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Will there be space provided, looking at how close the new bit of the building is to the roadway? Is there going to be any space provided for deliveries and emergency vehicles to be able to pull in and wait?
It's fine. You will be able to pull in off the road because there is an access way, which the Hicks Court, which is the gap in between the back of the New Bridge Street. So there's a vehicular right of way across the site for the people who need to access the New Bridge Street buildings. So certainly delivery vehicles can pull in and hover across there. They need to move out of the way if someone needs to get access to it. So there's no dedicated pull-in space or bay, to answer your question. Highway Authority haven't objected.
Councillor Mitchell.
Oh, no, red. Could you talk us through, because I can't see it clearly in here, there was an issue in the previous development, the proposed studio sizes in this compared to how they match the London standards. Because this building is placed between two, I would say, highly respected PBSA blocks, one at Eastgate and the other at Renslade House. So I'm assuming this is of a similar high standard.
I can't. Okay, thank you. It is addressed in the report. I'm pretty sure the average size of the room is 19 square meters, which is comparable to the gorge. There are some that are slightly smaller, and there are some that are larger. So there's a range of sizes, but it is at the very similar to the arrangements of the gorge.
And secondly, particularly in relation to that picture, which is a sort of nice evening twilight shot in Exeter, I assume, did the design team have any comments about the aesthetics of this building compared to its neighbouring environment, whether it's trying to blend in or whether it's trying to stand out? Because the brickwork, etc., it is quite a striking design and colour rendering.
Yes, I mean, our own urban designer was happy with it, but more importantly, I think, because there was a lot of toing and froing at one stage with Historic England, who had concerns about the obscuring of the building behind, and about the design of the original scheme and its impact in terms of scale and massing on the street scene. It led to this design eventually, which they were very complimentary about. They felt that the striking modern element was actually complementary to the street scene and to the historic environment. So they were very positive about it.
Councillor Vizard.
Thank you. Thanks, Roger. Just noting the Exeter Cycling Campaign's updated response, they still had some concerns on a number of points, still recommend increased residential cycling parking to recognise standards for car-free development. Fully enclosed secure parking with horizontal stands should be provided for residents. Provision for non-standard cycles, maintenance area and e-bike charging is still needed. Has there been any, I may need to direct this to the applicant, but do you know if there's been any further progress on that?
Yeah, perhaps it could have been made a bit clearer in the report, but most of those concerns have been addressed by revisions to the design. So the resident cycle parking is secure. It complies with standards. I don't think that there is any electric bike charging provision, but that's not something that we have any standards or policy requirement for. So that's a good idea, and it has been put to the applicant. We can't insist on it, but I mean, essentially, it complies with our standards for cycle parking, and it's secure. So it'd be very difficult to have any concerns on those grounds.
Any other councillors with question for the officer? In that case, we're moving on, and with no councillors understanding order 44 and no objector, we have a supporter, and that is John Cobb. Thank you, Mr. Collar. So first of all, in order to start speaking, you have to press the buttons on the machine. Once you've got a clear red light, you can then speak. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready to start. Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is John. I'm the architect for the scheme. Roger's probably covered most of what I'm going to say, but I should say it anyway. We first submitted our pre-app inquiry for this project back in March 2020. We evolved the plans and designs through many iterations and many discussions with Roger and his team and Historic England over the 4 years. We started with the design which was more akin to the height of the taller buildings on New Bridge Street, which was 7 stories at one point. The proposals have been developed in full pre-app consultation with Historic England and Exeter City, and we've now arrived at a design that is recommended for approval with no objections from Historic England. The site itself is probably the most interesting and complex site I've ever worked on in my career, I think. We've got the sort of historic context of Tudor Street and the Grade 2 star listed Tudor house on one side of the site. and then the much taller urban context of New Bridge Street and the city centre on the other side, not to mention the historic building itself. The site is in a very prominent location, highly visible from the busy road, but also adjacent to the city centre and all that has to offer. So I think the site is ideally located in a highly sustainable location for a co-living scheme. We've answered all of the technical requirements from the Environment Agency on flood risk, and my understanding is now that they're simply looking for some assurances on some, as Roger said, wording in the document. So we expect their objection to be withdrawn imminently. So to elaborate on that, we have no bedrooms on living accommodation on the ground floor, and there's the escape, as Roger pointed out, on the first floor level onto New Bridge Street. So it's only the communal spaces on the ground floor of the existing building which their query relates to at the moment. Likewise, we feel there are no outstanding planning reasons such as privacy or overlooking that should not lead to approval. The proposals themselves are for 34-bed co-living scheme. There is communal space throughout the building with kitchen lounges for every 6 bedrooms. All rooms are en suite, and there is communal space for the whole building on the ground floor. The submitted materials show that this will be an attractive piece of architecture, well designed in its historic and complex context. And this scheme will add another 34 truly affordable homes to the rental market within the co-living sector. I can answer questions in a minute, but I've got time, so is there a timer? The emergency vehicle access, there is a lay-by point within the site plan specifically for deliveries and emergency vehicles.
Right, thank you, Mr. Collins. So I'm now inviting questions of the speaker, starting off with Councillor Mitchell.
One question following the chair's question from the previous one. I might be allowed to take it. You talk of a 20% unit of affordable housing in the development. Does that ensure, where you have a range of rooms and prices across the development, that the 20% covers the whole spectre of the rooms you're letting out, or does it only affect the lower priced rooms on offer?
I'm not actually sure on the affordable housing side of this. I'm not sure if Roger might be able to help with that answer or not.
I can have a go. I mean, that would be something that could be negotiated as part of Section 106. So we could require approval of the range of rooms that were to be affordable potentially, to make sure. I mean, they're broadly quite similar in size, so it's not a big issue. But we could have a range from the smallest to the largest being dedicated to the affordable.
Thank you. Question. So it's Councillor Jobson.
Thank you for the point about the lay-by. Can I just ask if that's a single or a double bay? That's one.
Okay. That's a single lay-by for a lorry-size vehicle. Yeah.
For lorries.
A lorry-size vehicle, yes. And then there's also the disabled parking bay as well. Yeah.
The other ones are room sizes. In the report, it says average of 19 square metres. Can you tell us what the smallest will be? And will they be considered, not necessarily the smallest, but will any of the rooms or all of the rooms be considered for dual occupancy as opposed to single occupancy? And we've all read I'm sure you have the police concerns that they have raised. Can you say what steps you're going to take to satisfy those concerns? They're on page 46, 47 of the report, but I'm sure you'll know what they are.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact stats of the smallest size room. They're on plans, but the scheme's designed to have the kitchens outside of the rooms now, so that they've got a large kitchen lounge space to share for each six bedrooms. So that's why they might be falling a little bit shorter in some of them. The police concerns it will be the concierge service, which will alleviate those concerns of any sort of antisocial behaviour in the urban space.
I have a follow-up.
Of course.
Thank you. So do I take it that there will be no cooking facilities in any of the individual rooms? People will have to go out to the shared facilities to cook a meal?
Yeah, that's right. There won't be cooking facilities as such. I mean, whether if somebody wants to put a kettle and a microwave in their room, then they may well do that. But it's a shared kitchen facility.
Thank you. Any other councillors with questions, please, of the speaker? Councillor Ketchin.
Can I just get clarity about the concierge service? He's suggesting that in a small facility like this will be a 24/7 concierge to sort of provide that security.
Yeah, that will be for the operator to manage that. Yes, I mean, obviously I'm the architect, not going to be operating it. I'm not the developer, but that's what we've been told is the intention.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, this speaker, thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bennett. I do apologise.
Hello. In our report, it talks about design features that have been put in to encourage unwanted congregation, rough sleeping, potential antisocial behaviour. Could you just tell me what those design features are?
Yeah. Well, it's the glazed link, so it's to allow visibility out of from the building, from where the concierge will be. So it's the visibility. So that's the surveillance of it. Yeah.
Okay, councillors. In that case, Mr. Cole, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. You can resume your seat in the public gallery. Okay, I'm inviting the director, if you have a summary.
Briefly.
Please.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I think it's worth just reiterating what I've heard tonight, which is how well considered this scheme is over a very long period of time to evolve a scheme that meets, and no doubt, very exacting requirements of Heritage England to kind of fit into what is a very challenging and unusual context. It seems to me quite innovative approach taken here, and I think that the issue with Environment Agency again sounds as if it's not an in principle issue, and that it is a question of the detail to get that absolutely right. So the EA have done their job of due diligence to make sure that everything that can be done would be done. So there's some further minor changes, I think, to the internal layout of that ground floor, just to make sure if that wasn't possible, or if that requires significant further changes, then we would probably bring this back to you. But it feels to me as if that isn't a significant objection. It wouldn't have got to this stage if it was. And the issue about the management and affordable considerations, whether it's single occupancy or not, the management, all of that would be wrapped up within a Section 106 agreement, which is fairly standard now for these we're getting used to these sorts of developments now. I think that those issues can be well dealt with in the scheme. So what we've got is, again, it's 34 bed spaces. We've identified through lots of work, as part of the emerging new local plan, we've identified this is a need for the city. Whether you individually believe it's not the right kind of accommodation, that the evidence suggests that this is a need in the city, and other cities are getting used to co-living. Let's be honest, and you can see, why they're attractive. So if they're attractive to people and want to live in this kind of accommodation, and the emerging policy that we've got is to support this, then I think that tells its own story, frankly. So I think the report sets it out really well, and the presentation was very illuminating in terms of how well considered this scheme is.
Thank you, Director. Okay, we are now moving into our debate, so I invite contributions from the floor. I'll start with Councillor Patrick, please. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Visit.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to open this up by saying I'm fully in support of this application. I think that it's a fantastic location, it's car-free living, gives much needed housing, and I actually really like the design. I think it's striking, but without being abrasive. I think it looks really good. So I'm fully in support.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Mitchell.
I'm again fully in support of this application. It's not a principal objection I've got to co-living. It's just the site of where they are and look at each application in need. It is somewhat concerning as I see that we've got a lot of extant application approved for co-living, and we're yet to see that develop, and more is coming on stream. But in regard to this development, I think it's a very good use of the site. I just one thing I don't know if Roger could clarify on the flooding issue. The flooding issue mainly is relating to the new development element of the building. To what extent does the site, and you don't see this often as you drive past, to what extent does the site rise? Because surely if there is a flooding problem, there's a flooding problem for the old building as well, and we've heard nothing about that. Or is it because of the rise in land there that there is no issue in regard to the old building? It only relates to the new development, which is at a lower level. Is that the reason there's a flooding issue there?
The Environment Agency has a different approach to conversions than new builds on the basis that there's an existing ongoing use that could be taking place there. So they're not objecting to they're not, well, and again, if we go back to the plans, most of the ground floor uses of the conversion element are non-residential. Their concern is things like bedrooms being flooded. So it's on the whole, and we're nearly there, but not quite. They're satisfied with the range of uses being provided at ground floor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vizard first, and we'll go back to Councillor Dobson.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like this design. I think, and I think congratulations are due to the applicant and our planning team on this one. There's obviously a lot of work done over a long period of time to get to this, and it is a challenging site. I completely agree with what's been said by Ian on that. So I'm fully supportive of that. We can have this debate about co-living, but this feels like an appropriate building in an appropriate place and well designed, high standards in a key area. So I think it'll actually bring real presence and improvements to that area. And I'm very comfortable with the proposal on the Environment Agency's remaining concern. Sounds like that's going to be resolved fairly quickly. So I'm hopeful that we won't be seeing that one come back to us. But happy to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. Councillor Jobson.
Thank you. My concern is the police designing out crime officers report. I'm wondering whether some of the elements of that, it doesn't seem to me that even the most watchful concierge is going to be able to cope with all the issues that the police are worried about, whether any of the matters that the police raise can be dealt with by way of a section within the Section 106 agreement.
I think we need to comment on that, please.
Yes, I mean, I think the key to making it really work will be the management of it. We're expecting to be scrutinising very carefully a management plan, an ongoing management plan, as part of the Section 106 agreement. So we will most certainly be really mindful of the police's comments. I mean, some of the design has changed to reflect police concerns already, but the other bit, as I say, is about the ongoing management. So it's really nailing that down. That's the key to making it work.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick.
Much as I hate to disagree with our police service, one thing that co-living does have, it has a manager, it has a management plan, and it has strict rules. So it's actually, if people break those rules, it's actually fairly easy to evict them. Not that obviously I want to see people lose their homes, but if they are acting in a sort of criminal fashion, it's it's probably easier for them to be moved on or asked to leave than it is in most traditional accommodation when these things happen. So, you know, there's a point of contact to report to, and there's a strict set of rules, which you don't have normally in other types of accommodation to that extent in terms of behaviour. So I don't have any concerns around that area.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Warwick.
Just make a quick point, and that is that there doesn't seem to be any objection even from the ward councillors to this, so I'm fully in support of this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. In response to that, I will point out that there was an application to speak under Standing Order 44, but unfortunately it was not made within the correct time frame and therefore has not been allowed.
I wasn't making a point other than the fact it seems that there's not a lot of objection to it, Chair. Yeah, I'd take that on board.
Any other comments or contributions to our debate? Thank you, Councillor Ketchum.
I think what we haven't heard much about is the 40 objections to the site, and they're mainly based on the proximity of the two, of loss of privacy and on looking into windows. I don't think it should be downplayed. This is a very challenging site, and what we're taking is a commercial space and turning it into a residential space. So obviously out of hours when people are in their homes, there's that sort of sense of being looked onto, and I think that is something we've not heard about. I wouldn't downplay that, but that to me is the sort of the contentious element to this. But I've got to say, I'll be supporting this on the basis of, I think it's a difficult site. It's doing something very innovative with it, and it does, to my mind, lift the old building and add in something new that is very contrasting and very challenging to do. And it's been done in a way that actually lifts the area up. So I think, I feel, I just want to make the point. I'm not trying to sound sort of pretentious or anything like that. But you know, it's difficult for the people that are living there, and it was very kind of Roger to bring photos from his childhood to show us the what it was like previously. But you know, that said, it's not been like that in living memory, and we have to deal with the concerns of people that live there now, in the here and now, who've only moved in the last few years. And so it's difficult, but I think the site has risen, the design has risen to that challenge, and it's a reasonable ask of the people in the area that this should be allowed.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other contributions? Nope. Right. Okay, in that case, I am going to move the motion. I'm going to look for a seconder. Let's move, which I get from Councillor Azvashin.
The amended.
Right, okay, thank you very much indeed, yes. So, yeah, okay, so the amendment, as you had on page 4 of your things there, this is the revised recommendation that we are delegating to the service lead in consultation with myself, the chair, to grant permission subject to amendments to the scheme which enable withdrawal by the environmental agency of its objection and to the completion of a legal agreement under section 106 as amended to secure the list as listed there, 20% for build to rent, a contribution for local GPs, a management plan, and Roger has emphasised that will be very carefully scrutinised. The pedestrian right of way across the plaza, and a contribution towards the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Okay, so that is the motion that I'm moving with Councillor Fashion seconding. Can I ask for indicative vote of those in favour, please? Thank you. Can I have those against, please? And those abstaining, please. So with 10 for, none against, and 2 abstentions, that motion is carried. Thank you all for your attention in that matter. Right. Now moving on to item 6 on our agenda. We will have again just a very brief pause to reset the presentations. And I ask if you do get up, please only take a couple of minutes. Thank you. Please. Okay, this is item number 6 on our agenda, a planning application for 58 Main Road, Pinhoe, Exeter. I invite the officer to make a report.
Hello, I'm Hayley Stokes, the Assistant Service Lead, if you don't know me already. And you might be relieved to hear this is not a co-living development. It's a mixed-use development at 58 Main Road, Pinhoe. And there's a bit of planning history at this site of similar applications. One for a larger residential development in 2006 that was granted permission, but was also renewed in 2010, but was never implemented. So what I'll just do is talk through a bit of context and background to the scheme. So for people who know Pinhoe, it's 58 Main Road. that says High Road, but I think it's Main Road. It's a brownfield site. The site is on the northeast side of the city. It's sloping, so it slopes from the residential properties on the opposite down to the residential properties behind. It's designated as a local centre in the local plan. There's a mixed sort of retail, there's a pharmacy there at the moment. It's also located around, I looked on Google Maps, it's about an 8-minute walk from Pinho railway station. It's on, there are 3 bus stops within 200 metres from the site for buses taking you into the town centre, and obviously it's on a main arterial road into the city. So just some photographs of the site as existing. There's a car wash there at the moment. There's an MOT test centre. As you can see from the structure, there used to be a petrol station, but that's no longer in use. There's also a restaurant there, and I hear that you can take your car for an MOT there, and there's a barber somewhere and get your hair cut at the same time. So there's mixed use now. There's also a 2-bed flat in the roof space. So this is just some more photographs to illustrate the surroundings. You can see the 2-storey semi-detached properties opposite the site that are set back, so they're a little way back from the proposal I'll show you in a minute. And there's some residential terrace dwellings at the bottom there you can see. That's from Langerton Lane leading up to Main Road ahead, where you can see the semi-detached properties. I was going to say something. They've got long gardens to the rear, which I could demonstrate a bit better later. And you can also see, it's not on the photographs here, but on Google Maps, that and this is when it's annoying, I can't use the pointer on this, you can see the sort of boundary fence there. They're sort of storing sort of industrial bits and pieces in there at the moment. So it's not the most attractive of sites at the moment. So the proposal is a mixed-use development. It includes, just to help clarify, so the description includes classes, Class E, so commercial, business, service, Class F and Class F2. So there's options for local community and learning facilities there as well. The actual proposal incorporates, and again, it's a bit annoying, I can't show you on this. If you look to the far left-hand side, there's a small kiosk. The single-storey element are 3 sort of garages that would continue the existing use. The ground floor is the proposed commercial, and that main block in the middle that's split into 3 parts would be flats. So there'll be 8 flats in total. 4 of them are 2-bed and 4 would be 1-bed. And on the right, there's a single dwelling that would be a 4-bed property. Just show you. So this just shows the layout, so it's a bit better illustrated. You can see the garages there with some parking associated, and there's 5 parking spaces there. There's some communal space to the rear, which is 184 square metres, and some communal space, some amenity space for the dwelling at the end, incorporating a few existing trees. They will take away, if you can see the red line sort of dot of a tree on the right hand side of the image, they're taking away an existing ash tree but is suffering from ash dieback. But in compensation, the proposal is to provide 3 fastidious oaks, and that was following liaison with the council's tree officer. I think I said before, they're setting the proposal back a bit, so you've got a good footway at the front with 4 Sheffield stands, so that would be equivalent of 8 cycle parking spaces in total, and that would be for visitors to the flats, but also for the commercial development. And then there's a proposal for 10 cycle parking spaces for the flats to use. So I'll just show you a bit more context. So this is a bit of a blurry image, I'm afraid, of the proposed dwelling from Langerton Lane, and you can see the layout from the plan there. The hash line in the garden is an indicative outline for the cycle parking at the moment. And there's a little bit of an area for bin storage in the back patio as well. If I go to the next one, this again shows the elevations of the dwelling, so you can just see it from all sides. The main windows are the front facing onto Langerton Lane, so that's where most of the glazing is on that one. So this is another good sort of 3D visualization, so you can imagine what it would look like from Main Road. So you can see the commercial retail elements on the ground floor and then the residential above. There has been a lot of liaison with the council's design officer to try and sort of incorporate it into the street scene. So trying to get massing and height so it relates to the buildings opposite. They've sort of broken it up. I don't know whether you can see, and again, I can't point exactly, but there's sort of glazed links between the building to sort of break the buildings up a bit so they appear more like the detached dwellings opposite, so you can break the bulk of the building, and then some gable ends. There is some large, obviously, fenestration and windows on those front elevations, which is slightly different. Just a few more sort of elevations so you can visualize what it looks like, and we can, if there's any questions, I can come back to these as well. So in terms of commercial, in total it'll be 447 square meters, which is about 150 square meter additional commercial space compared to the existing site. And as I said, that's mainly Class E and Class F and F2. The kiosk, this is just some visualizations of the kiosk at the end. And then again, you can see the street from the other side. And this is just to help understand impacts on neighbouring properties. The purple sort of rectangles indicate 15-metre distances from windows in the main flat block and the dwelling, and the dotted line indicate 22 metres. So the 15-metre distances are illustrating points in our residential design guide, i.e. There's an allowance for a 15-metre distance when you have a building at a 45-degree oblique angle. So that sort of demonstrates most of those buildings meet our sort of policy requirement from the residential design guide. There is the buildings to the far right, so they're off Langerton Lane. There is a shorter distance from one of those. I think you can see the line that goes through the tree. That indicates the 22 metres, so it's actually 19 metres from the rear of that property. So it is a bit closer, but there is some intervening vegetation and only one window there. So if I just go on, this just helps illustrate with a cross section of the site so you can see heights. So the building, the main flat block building, so it's three stories, marginally higher than the properties on the opposite side, which are mainly residential, but obviously that top cross section illustrates that there's a vet centre there, and that shows there's a 25-metre gap, which is a good gap when it's on a main road, and illustrates the distances to the rear of 20 metres for most of the properties. I think I did show before there's a rather unusual arrangement. If I go back to this, with the back gardens, I think you can see in the properties there, they've got very large rear gardens, sort of 100 square metres, but they don't go from the rear of the properties, they sort of go at an oblique angle. These properties also have a significant amount of amenity space to the front of the properties. There's a large sort of public, sort of open green area, and they all have their own personal private off-road parking lots there. So I'll just go to just to summarise with the highway comments. I'll just read this verbatim, but the existing use would not be too dissimilar to the proposed use is their conclusion. It would therefore be unreasonable for the Highway Authority to recommend refusal on traffic generation. And I'd already set out what cycle parking provision there is, and that would meet the requirements in our SPD and from a policy perspective. As I've already said, it is quite a sustainable location in terms of transport, next to 8 minutes away from Poleslow Station. In terms of parking, in terms of car parking, there's 2 spaces for the residential properties, but it's proposed that the flats would be car free. And I have talked to the highway officer about this, and because of its sustainable location, you would hope that people could use this as a car free development. I even Googled how near Lidl was, and it's a 14-minute walk, which is pretty good, isn't it, for a very large supermarket within the close proximity to your house. But if people did, for whatever reason, choose to have a car, there is on-road parking on the streets just off Langerton Lane, a little bit nearby. Most people in this area do have on-plot parking. So there is, even when you look on Google Maps, there are spaces free if they did really choose to do that. But I feel this is, it's unusual in Pinho to have to be in a location where you do have such good transport links and somewhere on the outskirts of the city, but there really is here. So the conclusion is to approve this, but subject to conditions of the recommendation.
Thank you, and invite members to their questions for the officer. I'm seeing Councillor Patrick, then Mitchell, and then Sharon.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Just a quick question about the house. Just want to double check that the house doesn't have parking either. Is that correct?
The dwelling has 2 spaces.
Oh.
See the 2.
Oh, they belong to the house. Yeah. Oh, see. Okay. Yeah, that makes a bit more sense with the 4-bedroomed house. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I see this application has been referred through delegated briefing. Could you please explain for us the rationale for why it was referred to this committee? And secondly, whether any discussions have taken place with the developers subsequent to that to ameliorate whatever the issues were that arose at delegated briefing?
We discussed highway concerns with a principled discussion with both the local councillors at the meeting. So that's why it was recommended to come to this meeting. But in the sense that there isn't really, I don't feel there's anything else further you could negotiate to change the situation. Other than the fact we have talked to the highway authority, who said, we can't, there isn't significant difference to what we couldn't warrant it would be difficult to recommend a refusal on highway grounds for this application after discussion.
Just to clarify, the comment that appears on the screen there is common to dedicated highways and is that correct?
Yeah.
Highway issues.
Yeah.
Councillor Sharon.
Thank you. Is it working? Is it better? Thank you. With regard to the mature ash, I went on a site visit and I'm sure I got the right one. Is there any way on the map, is that on the boundary? Is that the one there on the boundary? Does it have to be removed?
So it's suffering from
Sorry.
It's suffering from ash dieback. So our tree officer went out to have a look and sort of assess the condition of the tree, and he considers it won't last that much longer anyway. Because it is sad, I agree. It's quite an attractive tree and quite large, isn't it? But that's what he's a qualified tree officer, and that's his assessment. And he was happy then with the option to replace those with other trees.
Just before you speak, Councillor Sharon, my understanding is where you see the 3 new trees.
Yes.
In that there,
yes.
That the ash that is of concern would be in the middle of that, and that's replacing them. That the ash that is on the boundary is still being retained.
Oh,
in its full
So
state.
that
There's nothing wrong with
is.
that. The one at the back is being retained. It's the one at the front closest to the road that is suffering from dieback, and that will be replaced by 3 new oaks.
And right.
So you can see the vague outline. You can see that.
I didn't see in the report anything though about any tests being carried out on it, because although the crown looks as if it's damaged, you can obviously, I'm sure the officer knows this, but you can actually test it to make sure if it's suffering or not. And mature trees, especially ashes, they tend to deal better with it and they can survive. But is that maximising, with the 3 new trees that will be planted, is that the absolute maximum that we can get in? Like, could we do underplanting or develop any more on that site? Are we fully using it?
There is a landscape condition as part of the development, so we can try and negotiate as much as possible as part of the landscape condition. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other members with questions? Councillor Ketchin and then Councillor Miller.
This idea of a sustainable site kind of I find a little bit irksome. It's all relative because things change. At one time, we can have as much public transport as we choose to, and I think that's what you're trying to say when you talk about a sustainable site. But currently, in Exeter, being one of the hardest hit parts of the country with regard to bus cuts, we're 40% down. My view would be that really puts cycling to the primacy, and I think I'm a bit. If the Exeter Cycling Campaign have a problem with the site and issues with the site, for sustainability, that would be a driving force given the.
I'm just going to stop you there. I think that what you're doing there is you're actually making comments for the debate. Are you specifically asking a question of the officer?
Oh, sorry, so you're quite right. You're quite right. Absolutely. I mean, I guess my question is, in view of the vastly reduced bus services, you can have would your view be you can have as many bus stops as you like, but if buses are reduced by 40%, does that still make the site sustainable in your mind?
So obviously there is the train station, which I think the service is hourly. So this is off the top of my head, but there's obviously an hour service, and the cycle link into town centre is actually quite good from there, as in off-road cycle routes. So, we can't predict these things, can we? Or we sort of can, but you would hope there would still be at least one bus passing that route, so that they would have the benefit of being able to use a train or a bus, you would hope, in the long term, because there's all the new development in East Devon beyond. So I would think it would still be viable to have a bus service along that route. But I also think there's a good cycle route, off-road cycle route, most of the way into the town centre there. And it's quite walkable. I walk 15 minutes to a supermarket. So
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. So the main concerns that I've had raised with me is about the proposed distance between the existing buildings and the proposed buildings. And you've obviously touched upon this about how you find that acceptable because of the angles that they're going to sit at. Was there any consideration given to slightly setting it, the proposed buildings any further back? And if you could just explain your rationale a bit further about how the angles make it more appropriate in terms of privacy and overlooking. Thank you.
So there have been some revisions to the scheme. Interesting enough, the main flat block, the bit away from the dwelling, that was actually moved further back, but all those, you can see all those distances fall within our permitted guidance. In terms of the dwelling, I think because the window is beyond the rear elevation, so its direct outlook is beyond the rear elevation, it's more into the gardens, which are extremely large. I think we just came to that conclusion, actually, the layout and the site, and to give the dwelling a little bit of a setback at the front was more appropriate for a dwelling. It's that weighing thing, isn't it? It's also negotiation, but trying to come up with the best solution. So I think that's why we decided this was approvable at the design it is now, working with the various officers.
Thank you. You want to carry on?
Just one more. So there were some concerns raised about the number of cycle parking provided, both for the commercial spaces, so visitors, as well as the residential. Just be interested to understand how the number of cycle parking spaces provided was arrived at.
I have to be honest, I don't know, but because I wasn't the officer for this, but the bottom line is there's 10 cycle spaces for 8 flats, so that would allow at least one cycle parking space for each flat, and that meets our supplementary planning guidance, design guidance. So and there's also additional spaces at the front. So from a policy point of view, I think that's what we have to go through for with our bottom line, and obviously try and negotiate as much as we can. But I think we're content that it meets the policy requirements at this stage.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members to the officer? No. Okay, right. We do have speakers under Standing Order 44. Councillor Wood, would you care to approach? As I'm sure you've worked out now, in order to speak, you press both buttons. You have, as a ward councillor, a limited time, but I would ask you please to keep yourself to the point and not repeat. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start off, I think, with what's good about it. What's good about it is that the site is very prominent in Pinhoe. It's not far from the double roundabouts, which are kind of viewed as the village centre. And what's currently there is a bit of an eyesore. It's an old petrol station, an old garage, and you could see from the photographs that it's tired. And so this would vastly improve that. In addition to that, it's a brownfield site and it's being used for homes, which is great. And also within the scheme as well, it's retaining the employment opportunities that are currently there. So there's some very good bits to it. As ever, the devil's in the detail. It's kind of complex to a degree because there's 3 elements to the application. You've got the one which is the commercial element, then you've got the flats, and then you've got the single residence. So I'll kind of do them in turn, as it were. The commercial properties, I certainly, as a ward councillor, in its current use, I get quite a bit of casework come in relative to the activities that occur at the moment. And that casework's irrelevant other than that site with the homes around it. What happens there does have an impact on the neighbours to it. So I'm sensitive to that what's there at the moment causes me a lot of casework, and so what replaces it, I hope, will be chosen with care. On that point, the restrictions or the terms, number 13, I think, on the very bottom, it says that it won't work as the operating hours will be, and then the word insert, which I guess is where the hours should have been inserted. They're not currently there. So if you approve it as it's written, then the reserve, there is no time limit on it. But the hours that those businesses intend to open at are listed in the conclusion of the report. So that's just an admin thing. It's no biggie. It's number 13, right at the end. Yeah, my pages are numbered differently on this thing. So yeah, just add that. Then it comes into the accommodation that's above the commercial properties. Obviously, that's been brought in line with, it looks like, where the current frontage is on the side of the road. Hasn't come further into the road than that. And that's obviously made the least overlooking that could be achieved from that particular, and that's good. It is forward though, and if you go back to earlier ones, you'll see the on-street parking that currently occurs, and it's driven by the businesses that are there, and it's the same profile of business that will be there after this is built. So you'll have a garage and you'll have one or two different businesses, and that generates sufficient vehicle use that currently it overflows and parks on the pavements. The road itself is the main road into Exeter from Columpton, which runs through West Clist, which has been developed out extensively. Not our patch, it's in East Devon, but it has seen quite a bit of development. And East Devon is developing those areas. So that is a very busy road and will get busier. And so any potential blockages to that road are not good. I mean, as ever, I'm sat here at an Exeter City Council planning, talking about transport, which Devon County Highways hasn't spotted, but never mind, I'm used to it. So there will be, whilst we say it's a zero car development, it's a garage, which I hope is not going to imply zero cars for them. So they will have cars that are there to be worked on that will be stored somewhere. Now, their space for storage is reduced from where it currently is. As I say, currently, if you go to the earlier slides, you will see that even now they're parking on the pavement next to the businesses. And that will continue. And much as we may call it a car-free development, it's then people move in and they are people like ourselves who may or may not have a car. And because there's nowhere to park it, they will park it wherever. And you're quite right that there is parking for spaces round the corner. But Pinhoe has had a fair bit of development, as you might have noticed. A lot of it is with a minimum of one car space, maximum of one car space per development. So we have seen a kind of migration, if you like, out from these new sites for people that have two cars or they have a car and a works van. Those extra vehicles get kind of dotted around Pinhoe and it starts to work its way down. So we do see displaced parking, I suppose you could call it. And I think this would add to it. Certainly when I visit the village, I struggle to find parking except on the fast turnover car park in front of the Spar shop, which is nearly opposite this. It's actually opposite the building on the right there. Just that's the Poli Chinese takeaway. Spar is opposite that. So I would struggle to find parking there right now. So when you put in 10 new residents and additional commercial space, I think parking will become an issue. So just pointing that one out because it will be a factor. I know it's not within our remit to actually comment on the impact on the main road, but I think that parking there will lead to people parking on the pavements. It just will, because they do it currently. You put more in there, they will continue to do it and do it more. Whilst it's an offence to drive on the pavement, if once you're parked there and got out, all you've done is blocked up the pavement. So that's my concern with regard to it being a car-free development for those flats. The overlooking for the flats themselves, I think is on the edge, but it's okay. And the buildings they look back on are at 45 degrees, and they are beyond the limit as well, so that's fine. The house, the distinct house, is the third element to the application. That road that runs curves around it is very thin, and we've raised it with the highways before, and it is the minimum. It can't be any thinner and still be allowable for that purpose. So what we're doing then is we're putting two driveways with vehicular access onto what is a tight curving road, which is in fairly heavy use, and I've had a few near misses just using it as a road. So that is a road which is of concern to the local community because of its tightness, and we are potentially putting cars straight out onto it. And also there is quite a bit of illegal parking that goes on that curve. And as I've said before, all we're going to do is increase the need to park around there. So that illegal parking will continue. So you're talking about trying to exit a driveway onto a thin road which curves, and you can't see where you're coming out because there are cars parked illegally left and right of your driveway.
So it's a concern. And I noticed from the 2005 outline plan permission that access and egress to the site is part of the reserved matters. So we can, I think that that is a concern. It's a real safety concern to me. And it's a big site. So I think it should be possible, if there are going to be parking for those houses, for them to come out differently. With regard to the house as well, that's the one where overlooking is a concern, because it does hit that house. What confused me, I think, is that those 3 green blocks are all in line, but the house is inset. And yet you actually want it to move away from the houses overlooking, not be inset. So I don't know why it's not in line with the other property, with the other elements of the development, and therefore moving it away from the house that it overlooks. So, I mean, it just looks like it's a piece of garden that's preventing it from lining up. So I don't, that just seemed odd to me to see that it's a concern, it's a problem. The overlooking is right on the edge of policy, and I would say slightly over it, and way to reduce it but not remove it would still be within the 2 meters. It would be to move the house down, but that's what I would suggest needs happening. What I hear from residents, I haven't had a massive amount of feedback, the same as what's on the portal, but there are some people who are distinctly affected by it. The feedback consists of the design and the massing. It is out of context with the road and with surrounding roads. Whilst I can see the kind of glass partitioning breaks it, makes it look like 3 buildings rather than one big block. It is actually, if you look at the pictures of it compared to the ones across the road, or if you knew the area, any of the surrounding roads, it's very different. And I think that would take some getting used to. But as I said at the start, even that would be far better than what's there at the moment. So I think in summary, I've got concerns about it being car free, because that's a nice idea, but people will move in with cars. And there's already a good degree of illegal parking that goes on in that area from displaced parking from other car-free developments, or reduced car developments. So that's a concern to me. I think the house being inset when actually it should be trying to go in the other direction is a concern. And the condition 13 obviously needs time stretch put in it. Other than that, I think those are my main concerns. Obviously, losing the tree due to ash dieback was going to happen anyway. But if we are going to get some, we're going to lose another one, I think you said. That's in place of those.
One tree. And
one tree, which was probably going to go anyway. Okay. Yeah. So the right hand side there is where we're seeing the green benefit, as it were. Okay. So I think that's probably all I've got to say on that one. Oh, sorry. There was one other thing. The food kiosk at the far left. That is, it equates to some of the other businesses. There's quite a kind of hodgepodge of businesses there at the moment. It's not a walk past facility. You don't walk past that generally. You're going to park up on the way in from Columpton or the way out to Columpton. You might stop off for a coffee and a bun or whatever. That means you've parked. There's no parking there. So that's a concern. Again.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Can I ask members if you have questions for the Councillor, starting with Councillor Mitchell?
Councillor, just for clarity from my own mind, this is this car parking issue. If we look at this design, which is what is proposed, how does that differ from what facilities are there at the moment? There are a number of shops there at the moment. If I needed to stop and use one of those shops, where would I park currently? And clearly, where would you expect me to park if a number of shops were there Particularly, is there any issues about the type of shop? But presumably, if you've got a fast food shop, might differ from a cobbler's or a pharmacy about the length of time you want to stop or be in the area. So what is the problem, and can it be overcome? Because years ago, you would have recess bits of the road with 4 or 5 parking spaces with a 20-minute stop in them at most. Cars will pull in, a bus will pull in and pull out, but that facility isn't there. So what's there now, and is this an improvement or not?
Thank you. I think there is a pull-in in.
There is a lay-by. Can you see the dotted line there, just between the benches? So there is a lay-by within the front of the scheme, so people could use that if they were going to the kiosk. I also suspect people in the garages and people visiting the garages.
Do we not have any car spaces on this?
So there's what in the lay-by?
In this, yes.
I would say, I don't know off the top of my head, but it looks like 2, I would say, from that. But also, can you see, I thought this was helpful because you can see the 5 car parking spaces associated with the garages, and that also, which are set back behind a wall. So you would hope that it would make it more difficult for people to park on the street. Then in terms of, I know there was comments on Langerton Lane, but now the grass goes right to the edge and perimeter of that site, and obviously with cars reversing out, that would make it more difficult to park on that bend now as part of the current scheme.
Well, delivery vehicles for the new shops, etc. there.
So they would go in the lay-by. That's right.
Yeah,
That was how I read the papers, that the lay-by was predominantly for deliveries, but that you could park there. And I mean, what we don't know, of course, is what will go into the commercial units. I know what's there at the moment. They might transplant. What's there at the moment is barbershop, pizza. I'm trying to strain my brain now. The garage, and there's a hand wash, car wash. But you know, different businesses can come and go in those, and we can't really predict it. But yeah, in terms of garage use, I don't know about your garage, but 5 spaces wouldn't serve my garage. It's got much more parking than that because they have to work through the number of cars. So I think at least those 5 will be filled up with the cars dropped off first thing in the morning to work through the day by the garage. So I think the parking in the grey areas used by the commercial needs of that company. So parking for any of the other green commercial uses, or even the salmon coloured ones, they will have to park illegally to access it. And anybody that lives in those flats will, that is a car owner, there is no parking around that isn't heavily used. This is the centre of the village, as it were. This is where the chemist is, where the spar shop is, where the 2 takeaways and a restaurant are. Parking is a bit of a premium around there because you've got the 2,000 new houses that have been built around the area, and they all kind of come in here.
Councillor Vizard first, then Councillor Warwick, then Councillor Pat. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Woods. I think you've given a very fair overview and summary. So what I'm asking is overall, weighing up the pros and cons, would you say that the concerns that you've raised outweigh the strengths of this scheme, and are you asking us as a committee to refuse it?
I think it's definitely a brownfield site that needs development. There's no 2 ways about it. It's ugly and it's not effectively used, and this really crams it in. Maybe too much, but it really crams it in. But on balance, I think I would like to have seen the house moved downwards on the plan that we've got here. It seems bonkers because it's causing a problem with overlooking, and it's moved up to make it worse. But overall, in terms of refusal, I think it's the best I've seen come forward for that site. So, and it's a site that needs development.
Right, sorry, where were you here? Councillor Patrick? Oh no, Councillor Warwick. My apologies.
Councillor Wood, I go back in that area to when the restaurant there was a supermarket. Remember, it was Tesco's. There was a car park there. Then is that gone?
That is still there, but now it's got a parking enforcement company running it. You get an hour for free, but the camera clocks you on the way out, on the way in, and if you don't leave within an hour, you get a nice bill in the post. So it's okay for use with regard to the chemist, which is right next door to that, and you can get an allowance if you go in the restaurant and get your number plate written down. But effectively, that's not a car park that's used locally, because enough people have been fined in there that they steer well clear. And certainly, if you were going to, if you were living in those flats, it's not a car park you could use.
Sorry, if you're going to go to one of those shops, you could use it, couldn't you? As long as you weren't there more than an hour.
It is used for that. So it's used for the chemist. It's used for the spa. There you can get a space in there. Most times you try to get in there, you'll find somewhere. But in terms of this development, other than walking down there, for perhaps if the barber moved back in after it had been built, yeah, that would work.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wood. So what I've heard is an area with we've got takeaways, we've got chemists, we've got station, we've got I know there's doctors because that's my doctors. There's an awful lot going on in Pinhoe Village. It must be a really great and sustainable place to live. So with weighing all of that up, it seems to me like the residents of these properties could quite easily go car free with, as you say, a supermarket only a short distance away. So I think what I'm hearing is a sort of thriving village community with a lot going on, which would support a car-free environment. Would you disagree with that?
I'd agree with the concept that it could go car-free. What I don't know is whether the individuals moving to those flats would fully sign up to the idea when they had a car in their last place. And giving up your car is a personal decision, which I think you need to has so many different factors. Do you have well, in fact, those flats wouldn't work with a family, would they? So you won't have kids, but you may actually work in Columpton, for example, off the road a bit. Then you might need a road. You could catch a bus to Columpton, but that drops you in the centre of Columpton. So I would say that yes, in principle, if we had the sort of public transport system that we deserve, then I can see it being sustainable. But I think I'm unconvinced that 10 people will move in there that all won't use their car.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Councillor Wood? In that case, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I do not have anybody speaking as an objector, but I do have a supporter. I'd call John Connor to. I'm going to say the stand then for a minute. You know the system by now.
Remember it well.
So we've met before. So I speak today in favour of the proposals, not only as the architect of the project, but as a local resident of Pinhoe. So architecture and urban design have always been a passion of mine. So having the chance to shape the environment so close to where I live is obviously very important to me. Very passionate about that. Pinhoe is a very thriving place. The site as it currently stands is not very tidy at all and generally a bit of an eyesore. In urban design terms, it's the boundaries of the existing site that are particularly poor, non-existent in most places. The pavement's very undefined along that edge. And this, coupled with the low quality, low-rise architecture, causes the public realm in this location to be very weak. So the designs that we have come up with are more than just a building design. We've carefully considered the way in which the building and boundaries to the site touch the public urban realm. They create a strong and active street frontage, and the taller building heights are much more proportionate to the width of the road in this area, as was evidenced by the sections that we've drawn and submitted. We've shown through diagrams and sectional drawings submitted with the application that back-to-back distances are acceptable within policy guidance. Moving away from my notes there, the house is set back slightly for a couple of, well, mainly just to create a bit of defensible space against the main road, and a bit of definition to that. So if that house was further forward towards main road, it would be right, that window would be right up against the pavement, so that's why it's set back slightly. Moreover, I think the distance is 19 meters to the corner of the house from the nearest window, which is very close to the 22 meters direct back to back, but it's at an angle as well. So we feel that that's, plus there's the tree there as well. So we feel that that was acceptable. The uses of the site have obviously been established, and we're just looking to provide a better quality retail space, more and better quality residential units, better quality architecture generally there. We've covered the fact that the site is, in my words, the very definition of a sustainable location. There's so many amenities there. It'd be quite possible for somebody who rents or owns one of the flats to live, to obviously live, to work right in that area. What other points were raised? The parking. So there's also, as well as the car park, there's also another smaller car park with a couple of electric charging bays just the other side of Poley, and about 5 or 6 car parking spaces there, which are free for a period of time, which would be fine for visiting those shops. I will be going there in a minute to get a takeaway. I've sort of departed from my notes, but I just wanted to respond to some of the points raised.
Yeah, thanks. Get half into the time. Thank you. We're right. Okay, so now asking questions. Let's start with Councillor Miller.
Thanks, John. I also very much support the improved commercial space on this site. I was just wondering if there's been any discussions today about who might occupy those spaces should they be built out and the application approved this evening.
No, not that I'm aware of. The current owner of the site is the applicant. They, I believe, intend to occupy the car garage, just move their business into the new unit. I think he owns all of those. I think he sort of runs the barber and the pizza place, and I imagine that they'll go back in there. I don't know. Otherwise, they might be speculative units.
Thank you. Councillor Ketchin.
I've got it this time, but it's just not my evening. It strikes me with the 4-bed house that the measurement of 19 metres is from furthest rear window of the house to the furthest away rear window of the angled houses. And if you're to take the other east or right side of the house, which is a discrete bedroom, which is marked, that would be closer by a few metres. So I'll get to my question. I'm almost there. It's not unprecedented in Exeter to have on main roads houses that directly abut the pavement. But it's nice to have a boundary. So if that was to make the scheme fail, because it would be a very sad thing for the scheme to fail, would you consider moving the house to reassure and meet with the more closely with the planning regulations? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I think I can make a couple of comments on that. So the reason that the measurement was taken from that place is because that's where the window is. So on the bottom right-hand elevation there, the window on the furthest right is where we've taken the measurement. As you can see on the left-hand side, which is the right-hand side on the plan, there's no window. So that's why we've measured the back-to-back distance from the window, because the window to that bedroom on the front is on the other elevation, the front elevation. So I think that's the right place to take the measurement. You asked if the scheme wasn't approved, would we consider moving the house? Yeah, of course. Yeah, if it wasn't approved today, then would, and moving the house would get it through, then we'd do that. I think it's the right thing to have that defensible space there, given that we've got 19 metres to the corner of the house, which is not far off. I mean, not far off policy guidance anyway, and that's if it was direct back to window, it should be 22. I'm sure you know. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Here, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. We often use the word car free. What we mean is no car parking provision on site. Not car free, as Councillor Wood pointed out. We can't stand at the borders of Exeter and say, leave your car here, you can't come in with a car. In relation to the site, which is quite a large site, and I would have thought both from resale and rental point of view, makes it more successful potentially if there is some residential car parking available on site. Is there no way you considered putting residential parking on the site for some of the residents of the flats?
Yeah, I think we looked at in early concept stages at parking on the site. We could have bought had an undercroft and bought an entrance through to the back where the communal space is and have parking up back there. It's very tight, and then you do away with the communal space. It's a large site, but the site to the left there is obviously all of the car MOT place, which is the applicant's core business. So they need to keep that as part of the scheme. So given the fact that it's such a sustainable location, and as I understand it, the policies and to drive towards the modal shift, or however you want to term it, but car free, it seemed like a very good location to do that.
Any more questions? I've just got one brief question, which is about one of the objections referred to the loss of a communal back passage. I have not seen anything else about that. Have you actually blocked off what is a footpath, or were there no rights of way anyway through?
Certainly none that I'm aware of. No, I'm not sure what that would refer to.
If there are no more questions of John, then thank you very much indeed. Right, okay, so before we move into a debate, do you have any comments? No, I don't. Okay, so we are going to move into debate now. Does anybody wish to make a contribution? Councillor Smash.
Thank you, Chair. I can't see I haven't heard any reasons that would persuade me to say no to this application. Even the ward councillor has kind of said that it's much better than what is already, or what is currently there. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vizard, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thought the supporter answered the questions very solidly indeed. Good questions, good answers. I do understand the point about displaced parking, but I prefer to see car-free flats on a suitable location and a sustainable location as this is. Albeit there are issues with bus services, we know that, but that's not really for this committee. Had Devon County Council Highways raised any objections around this, then we'd have to take careful note. But as they haven't, nor about the narrow street and vehicles exiting, there's no reasons there that I can draw on to object myself and refuse this. And in terms of the overlooking from the house, again, I understand the points made, but as the porters stated fairly confidently, it's still within reasonable and acceptable levels given the angle of the houses. So on all that basis, I welcome this and will support it.
Councillor Patrick.
Thank you. This development comprises of some much needed flats of a different variety. Obviously, we've had a lot of co-living, so it's quite nice to see some flats come into the mix. It's absolutely sustainable. It's a great area to live and work. And just a reminder that there is actually quite a good choice of new build housing in the Pinho area. where people, if they really do have a car and they do want a parking space, there are lots of other housing options available in terms of sort of new builds. So I think that if you were looking to move into one of these properties, and you had a car, maybe you'd be considering something else. So I don't really see the car issue as being particularly prominent. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Any other Councillor Mitchell?
I support this application. Listening to Councillor Wood and the developer, the same as other councillors have said, the answers have come back clearly. That this is a welcome development in the area. It improves the local environment. It adds to the housing stock in the area, particularly of much needed 1 and 2 bedroom housing. So it is to be supported. As I say, the whole question about vehicle movements, in effect, our hands are tied. The Highway Authority have done their calculations. They've worked it out. We have no grounds. We might have suspicions, but we have no grounds on planning terms for turning around to them and say, you don't know our business, we do it better. In that regard, I sometimes wait for the day when the Highway Authority is going to say no, but I won't hang on for anything for that one. But from that point of view, I think this is a welcome development, and I think the quicker it is developed, the better for the area.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else with any contribution to the debate? Councillor Ketchin.
I think it's fantastic to see some flats coming forward in areas where the dominant housing stock's been quite uniform. So this is a fantastic addition to the area. And we talk about mixed housing and balanced communities. This is absolutely it. I won't be objecting on the sort of minor niggle. Well, it's not a minor niggle for the people being looked onto, but this is the third proposal we'll be potentially approving tonight that sort of it sort of rides over this 22-metre rule. I don't view it as an absolutism, but it is an important relative consideration. But it's I think overall a great scheme that brings the kind of housing that is a fantastic starter homes, and so I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor. Was it Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo some of the comments of my fellow ward councillor, that I do think the proposal will be an improvement on the existing use. And I like the mixed use nature of the proposals. I think they're on the whole quite appropriate, and we'll look forward to seeing them come forward, hopefully. Obviously, I do still have slight concerns around the Langerton Road entrance and around the distance from that proposed house at the end house just there. But on the whole, I think, it will be an improvement, and I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other contributions to the debate, please? I'm not seeing any. Okay, in that case, the proposal before you is to approve, subject to the conditions, and an indicative vote. Thank you. So I am totally used to a chair of a committee should be able to make a proposal and not be seconded. I understand that it is accepted. Yes, I'm going to let it go, and I've got my seconder. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Right, I'm going to put an indicative vote first of all, please, of those in favour of the approval. Thank you. Thank you. Any against, please? And are there any abstentions, please? I think that's quite clear. I'm taking 11 for, 1 against, and that motion is carried. Our next item on the agenda is item 7. This is a list of decisions made and withdrawn applications. Director, have you had any indications that anybody have any points to raise on that? In that case, we would like to. Okay, I think that's on item 8, isn't it? No, I believe that's it. So we're now moving on to item 8, which is the appeals report. Did you have a comment to make? Yes.
I'll
Okay.
There's just one issue to raise really, which is I think some of the committee will remember this application. It's the piece of land adjacent to Grass Lawn, Fleming Way. So that the committee refused that planning application. It's been to appeal. It was approved on appeal. There's a slight inaccuracy in the report that there were no costs awarded, but the appeal was upheld. So as it stands today, we don't have a detailed feedback for you, but we'll bring that back to the next committee so we can just understand what the inspector's reasoning was for that scheme.
No, definitely not menacing. Right. Even though this meeting is recorded. Right. Okay. In that case, once we've got to item 8, that's been accepted into the record. Date of our next meeting is Monday, the 19th of February. Thank you all indeed for your patience and attendance this evening. And thank you very much for the debate, which I think has been really good. Thank you all for your contributions. Good night.